Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the BetterWealth podcast. We're talking about section 2 of the book review, The And Asset. I had the opportunity to walk through with a bunch of financial professionals that are going through our And Asset endorsement program. And what was really fun is section 2 is a lot of content. We talk about compounding, we're talking about control, talking about the 5 elements of banking, we're talking about taxes, and just so much more. And it's based, again, around the concept of efficiency. And so there was some highlights in there. I'm sure my team's incredible, and they're going to take out highlights and really give you some of the best of the training. And so the hope is you'll listen or watch and say, man, I want to get a copy of Caleb's book. So you can always go to Amazon and pay full price for it, or you could go to betterwealth.com/vault. It's betterwealth.com/vault and get this for the cheapest price that it's selling. The other thing that I want to say is this. The And Asset Vault is everything you need to know about the And Asset. We have case studies. We have testimonials. We have over 100 plus and counting frequently asked questions. We have a master class. We have so many other resources for whether you're a financial professional or whether you're someone that's looking to apply an And Asset in your own life. Like, we want to be the one-stop shop for you to equip you and to help you show up powerfully. And so go over to betterwealth.com/vault, and it's totally free, by the way, because selfishly we want people to learn as much about this powerful strategy as possible so that they can be equipped and take back control. And so without further ado, here's section 2 of the And Asset. This is Better Wealth with Caleb Guilliams. I had a blast last week. I don't know if any of you guys could tell. I was on fire. Like it was going through memory lane of thinking, okay, efficiency and the importance of efficiency. And I'm really excited because when we actually launch the And Asset course, you're going to see that in meeting 1, it all comes down to efficiency. Like, we're not talking about products. We're not talking about things that really don't matter. We're talking about efficiency, and we're making it valuable. And so going through that just was really, really a powerful thing. And just to go back on my boy Steven and talking about, already want to modify the book, which, by the way, I appreciate, because that's exactly why this book was written. Like, this book was written because I read other people's books, and I'm like, I don't really love that. And so a lot of people are like, I like how the book is written because it's easy to understand. It's like, I'm not that smart. I've just taken 5 books that I sort of liked, put it all into one, and walked people through that process. And so that gives you just maybe a little bit of context of E = MC squared. But the point that I wanted to make is the 2 C's represent the 2 financial functions. Obviously, like in the book, we have multiple ideal benefits. But at the end of the day, the functions, you could boil them down into future value, compounding, or control. And then it obviously, if Albert Einstein came up with a third C, we probably would come up with another C, to be honest. So now we're going to talk about compounding. And this is like really, really key. And probably when I asked Jason Lowe, who's my business partner in Canada, when I asked him what the most profound thing was as it relates to the And Asset, he talked about this idea of uninterrupted compounding. And Albert Einstein, who never really said this quote, but he's like one of the most misquoted people for saying this. So at this point, we probably could give him credit because, who cares? People just know this as his quote. And he talks about the 8th wonder of the world is well, I can't read the quote, but it's compound interest, and he who understands it earns it, he who doesn't pays it. Like, let me get these people. Yeah, there we go. And so that's just like that's really profound, right? This was always interesting for me because it's this like putting the stake in the ground, being like, okay, why is this so valuable? And so one of the things that we need to do is we need to understand what is compound interest. We talked about this yesterday. But compound interest is this like amazing force, and it's a function of 3 things. And we talked about this last week, but it's a function of your money over time growing. and it's awesome, right? And so the difference between compounding and simple interest is simple interest is just something like if you back in the day, like with CDs, you put your money into something, they pay you like 2, 3, 4%, but it doesn't, you're not, the next year, you're not earning on the interest and principal. You're not getting that exponential deal. The other thing that is really, really valuable as it relates to uninterrupted compounding is the lifelong aspect of this. And so it's that we are playing, and you'll want to write this down, we are playing a lifetime game. We're playing a lifetime game. When you commit to a compounding strategy, you should commit it for life. And we should, the metric that should measure that is for life. Majority of financial strategies and people don't have a good metric long-term to compound money over a lifetime. It's just something that's interesting. Now, the power of the penny doubling, and this is something that I shared when I was with you guys in Dallas, is it's like this really interesting thing, and I think it teaches people a lot, and a lot of people remember it about your penny doubling. But the reason I put this is I not only wanted to talk about the importance of compounding, which, you know, it's obviously your penny will double and be over $5 million. Like, that's pretty amazing. But I think what it does such a good job with is then it shows you the extreme examples of what a fee can do, what losses can do, what you know, a 15% tax, and it goes back to what we said earlier is every time you lose a dollar, you don't just lose that dollar, but you lose what that dollar could have earned you the rest of your life. And so the big thing is, don't disrespect the value of a dollar. We don't disrespect the eighth wonder of the world. Majority of financial plans, people are disrespecting the eighth wonder, and it shows up in almost every area, and it's very evident. So here are the three areas where people are really getting crushed. And then the fourth one is obviously use. But anytime we lose money, I feel like, again, this is very much of a reminder from last week. You don't just lose that dollar, but you lose what that dollar could have earned you the rest of your life. Any fee, any unnecessary tax, any area that we use money with and not understanding the consequence. The reason this is important, guys, is when we start meeting with clients, we need to be experts at highlighting areas that they're losing money, i.e. this is an efficiency aspect. And the real winner is when you show them money that you're saving them, and then you're showing it over their lifetime. Because you could save them $10,000 a year by helping them with taxes and potentially fees and potentially eliminating losses or whatever, being more efficient as they purchase things. But $10,000 every year for the next 30, 40 years is amazing. And so the knocking over the domino with uninterrupted compounding is strategic on multiple levels, because not only do we want to teach people that, not only do most people buy into that, but then we can also truly understand opportunity costs when we understand compounding. All right, so now we're going to talk about the effects of the transfer. And David, this is where your question gets answered. Is in the book we talk about losses and taxes and fees, and we take, like, you have $5.3 million, and if 3 days it doesn't compound, you now have less than $1 million. And if you paid 15% tax, you know, every year on the growth, so, and another way to say that is you didn't double your money, you just grew it by 85%, which is pretty good if you ask me. You have nowhere near the $1 million. A 2% fee, what's interesting about that is a 2% fee ate up over $2 million. Again, these are extreme examples because we're putting the variable as doubling your money each year or each day, which is crazy, but it's still like a 2% fee ate up over $2 million. And then losses, and then when you include them all, and this is where I use the calculator, and what I did was I compounded that, and this actually highlights a really good example, because you can't just subtract each of these numbers. You wouldn't get a true value because of opportunity cost. If it was just 1 year, if it was just static 1 year, you could. So what we could do is if you lost $10 and then through tax you lost $5 and then through a 2% fee you lost $2, you could add up those together and say this is your loss and subtract it from the number. But every time you use another year, now you're taking the lost opportunity cost, if that makes sense. And again, just put in the chat if that makes sense, because the loss opportunity aspect is really, really key. And that's why, losses, taxes, and fees are all the way down to $51,000. None of our clients are living in a bubble. They're experiencing multiple losses. And the reason I didn't include use in this category is if I put a use, if I actually use some of the money, you would have a negative number, and I didn't want to have a negative number in this book because I just thought that would be way too dramatic. So this is not assuming anyone spends any of their money, which we all know is like the biggest wealth transfer over your life. But yeah, when you add losses, taxes, and fees, it's pretty insane. And this question is a money question. So I want to share the background story to this. So Todd Langford is a mentor of mine, and at one of his workshops, he asked the question, when people look at a rate of return and they say, "Oh, that's a horrible rate of return," we have to be able to ask the question, compared to what? Like, compared to what? Like, is 4% a bad rate of return? Well, it compares to what? To a savings account? How many of us would love to have 4% in a savings account? That would be great, right? Maybe 4% in a mutual fund might not be good. That might not be something that we're excited about. But we also have to understand all the other factors that our money is facing as it relates to your financial life. And I say that sincerely, you guys, because a lot of times when we look at life insurance, the number one thing, especially if it's whole life insurance, the number one thing that will be is like, oh, like that's not a great rate of return, even if you look at like over 20, 30 years. And we have to be able to, number one, not be able to be hurt over that or try to justify it. We just have to understand, okay, 4% compared to what? Because are we comparing this to an investment? Are we comparing this to Bitcoin? Are we comparing this to rental real estate? Or are we comparing it to a like asset? And I think 4%, when you include taxes, when you include alternative fees, when you include other things like risk, I think it's a pretty solid thing for the asset and where it falls in line. So one of the big things that I've really, like, this has changed my life, is early on I would be very much focused on, okay, I'm going to compete with these things. And I've taken a step back and just been very much like, okay, you're making statements, but they're with half truths. And when you understand the whole picture, you're going to understand that 4% might be more like 7% if you're going to compare them to other investments. And oh, by the way, there's a ton of benefits that life insurance brings that no other asset brings. And when you compare all the like benefits, it's really hard to say that that's not good to have in your portfolio. And again, this is the thing that probably has positioned us to be strong, one of the strongest compared to other people, is because we lean into this and we're not trying to beat over the people's heads that life insurance is the only way to your wealth. All right, so I read negative reviews, and probably the most negative reviews come from this section right here, because rightfully so, people are like, you are cherry picking dates where this perfectly works, and they're correct. I looked at over a 19 period of time where the market got 8%. Why did I care about that? It's just like that's what everyone was saying, like, oh, the market will always get 8%. And if I had to rewrite the book, I probably wouldn't include this section because it makes me come across as someone that's anti investments or anti-market. And for those of you that know our practice, like, we have an RIA, I am pro investments. I'm not anti any investments. I just, I've also said publicly, if you're going to put your money in the market, like, indexes are not a bad way to go. And we could have a whole discussion on the pros and cons of that. So whether you believe this or not, what I did was I just took a period of time and looked at where the average rate of return was over 8%. And then what you do is, if you factor in the things, the taxes, the losses, and fees, you realize that people don't have a fraction of what they thought. And so actually in the book, pull this up, in the book, we get, when we add fees, taxes, and losses, you get a rate of return of 2.94%. 2.94%. Let me ask you this. Are we giving the people the control to utilize their money while they're making a whopping 2.94%? No. I want that to sink in. So this is page 38, where I break down, okay, 4%, is this good or bad compared to what? And I did cherry pick this, but look out over a 19 period of time where you take the S&P, where your money's only doing one thing. And yes, we're making some assumptions with you're paying tax every year, which is, doesn't happen in a qualified plan. And you're paying a 2% fee, which if I had to do it again, I would lower again, this is where I got the most criticism from the book. But the point is, I wanted to lay out, like, you could say that an 8% is better off than a 4%. And I just compared to what, I would almost take the 4% knowing what I know and giving my dollars 2 jobs rather than 1. Anything that I feel like I'm...
Yeah, no, here's what I'll say about everything that we're looking at. This is just ammunition at the end of the day when people come at you and tell you how bad life insurance is, because we know that life insurance is an amazing asset, it has amazing attributes. But at the end of the day, life insurance is its own asset class. It has a different utility than anything else on the planet. So when you can't compare it to investments, you can't compare it to, in my opinion, you can't even compare it to a savings account, because the savings account has such different attributes that a life insurance has. They're so different. So what Caleb is sharing with you, this isn't to say that life insurance is the greatest place in the world to store money, or it's better than this or better than that. But what he's telling you is just, hey, look at what is going on in the bigger picture. And it's giving you firepower when other people say, hey, like life insurance gives you a low rate of return, or life insurance doesn't give you, essentially what you're looking for. You can go put it in the market. So at the end of the day, that's what's most important with what he's saying.
Absolutely, man. And these 8 questions are, again, meant to be for, like, embed these as we go through processes with people and you're meeting with people. Like, these are all door openers. These are all things to keep your mind, like the first question, will your money be safe as it earns lifetime compounding? The way I would modify that is, are your clients, are people that you're meeting, are they getting their money compounding the rest of their life? It's a good question to get people to think about. And then what does that mean? Second question, do you have a strategy to best utilize money without hurting lifetime growth? Obviously, that's a classic and asset question, right? Do you have the ability to utilize capital without hurting or disrespecting the 8th one in the world? There's another thing that I'll draw compounding curve, and then I'll draw it like 65, age 70, and like draw a line and say majority of people, like, we want to say, let's compound our money, but we're taking our money out when we could get the most growth. And so it's like we're disrespecting this quote unquote 8th one of the world, and it's problematic. And then number 3, does your money have any guarantees to get lifetime compounding? Obviously, that's a direct, play into the guarantees that we have having with life insurance, especially whole life insurance. And then number 4, how will fees be factored into your wealth? This is a good question. When people are meeting with you, if you're able to highlight the areas that they're losing money to fees, it just, again, creates more credibility. Number 5, is your lifetime compounding potentially impacted by the government or regulatory change? This is, again, what does the future regulations, and we're going to have a whole chapter on taxes, what does the future of where your money's housed, how is that going to affect your wealth? Like that, right there. I talked to, right before coming on, I chatted with a CPA who got referred to us, and she wanted to know a little bit more about our firm. And she literally, she didn't know anything about our company. And she was saying, I don't like this idea of a 401k because people think it's a tax savings, but I don't think taxes are going to be lower in the future. This is someone that has no background on insurance or whatever. She's just intelligent. And she's like putting things together. She's saying, like, I don't love that I only have an option to kick the can down the road. And I don't know what that's going to be. It doesn't feel like a true savings. And it's like, wow, like that was powerful. And that was something that she said without even being, led or coached. Number 6, is your lifetime compounding passive, or does it take active management? It really comes down to who you're meeting. And it's a good question as it relates to, is my money continuing to grow? And how much work is it going to take? Number 7, will your lifetime compounding continue to grow if something happens to you, like a disability or death? Guys, you guys know this. This has a lot to do with life insurance right now. There are certain riders, or there are certain things that can be in place that even if something happens, i.e. you die, or i.e. you get disabled, that doesn't need to hurt the lifetime compounding of your wealth. We'll get into that when the program actually starts. And then number 8, how will taxes, present or future, affect your lifetime compounding? Another way to ask one of the questions above. Anything, Dom, that you want to say before I
go to the next thing? There's something that I did want to mention when you were talking about before, when it was the simple versus the compound interest.
Yep.
I think it's important to understand that we want to earn compound interest, but pay simple interest. And that's important to know because of how our loan rates work. And so if you let your interest compound over each other on your loan, you're now having compounding interest on top of each other. But if we are paying the interest and we're paying that simple interest, we are now having simple interest on our loan, which means we will be we'll be way ahead on the other end. So when we're teaching people how to use the and asset appropriately and to be responsible, we always at the bare minimum want to tell people, hey, you don't have to essentially pay your interest back if you choose not to, because a death benefit will pay for your loan if something ever happens to you, God forbid. But it's important to understand that if you pay at least the interest every single year, you'll always and forever will only pay simple interest. But the second you miss that interest payment, you are now paying compounding interest, which is what we don't want to do, because you can see how powerful it is when you're having that compounding interest tap on top of each other. And we don't want it to go the other way.
All right. I like it. Compound interest should be on your side. And going back to Albert Einstein, it says he who doesn't, which back in the day he said he, but I think if he had to re-say this quote, he would say the person would, the person that doesn't understand it's going to work against them. If you look at this country and you look at the world, a lot of people are getting they're on the wrong side of compounding interest, which is really sad. This example in the book of world being flat or round was really profound for me, because I was really struggling with the idea of like the life insurance long term, and even the first couple of years you'll find that like you don't have dollar for dollar access to your money, and it was just really hard for me to grasp. And I had a coach / mentor. He just said, Caleb, is the world flat or round? Now I'm not opening up for debate on this topic, so I respect all opinions, but I was like, oh, it's round. And he's like, okay. And he kept on asking. I'm like, what are you getting at here? And he pretty much said, it depends on where you measure. I'm coming from you in Denver, Colorado. It's very mountainous here. But if I go outside, I can find a piece of land that's very flat. And I could come to the conclusion that the world is flat by what I measure. So hear me out here. It depends on what we're measuring. For compounding to work, for compounding to be valuable, we have to have a lifetime time frame. We have to think multiple generations. We have to think long range kind of deal. And the problem with all this stuff is a lot of people, again, going back to last week, feel like you need to choose. You need to choose between either controlling money or compounding it. And the cool thing about the and asset is we're allowing you to take that long-term approach and give you the ability to still have access to capital to do other things. But if we really understand the power of lifetime compounding, we really lean into that, it's going to set up control powerfully, and it's going to then set up controlled compounding in the function of allowing your money to do multiple things in a really powerful way. And so think about this book was essentially taking a bunch of examples from the real world, and pretty much each page essentially has different questions that you could bring up or thought processes as it relates to that. And then this just goes back to what Dom said about earning versus paying, and talking about amortized interest and simple interest, and earning compound interest. And what I would say is a lot of people, again, are focused on I don't want to be in debt, I hate paying interest. We want to make sure that we can totally be on top of things and earn interest versus the paying. Does that make sense? We're going to jump into my favorite chapter, which I probably have said a couple times. It's like I don't have kids, but I'm sure everyone secretly has a favorite. I believe that, Dom, but they don't say they have a favorite. So, anyways, compounding or slash control. So, control is the second C, and this you guys, it really comes down to if someone doesn't value control, they're not really going to see the power of the and asset. I mean, we'll in the section when we go through the course, we're going to talk about life insurance and retirement. And there's people that are very, very smart that will talk about why life insurance enhances your retirement portfolio. So that is a route, but at the end of the day, if people don't value control, the and asset becomes less valuable to them. It still works, and we're going to show you guys how you can position it. But control is going to be the thing that separates you, because at the end of the day, majority of people are not teaching their clients on how to better take control of their wealth. And so, the greatest financial need that you have, this one is another question. It's like, okay, Dom, what is your greatest financial need? And it could be like if you're not thinking about it, you could see like retirement, or maybe paying for your mortgage, or getting a good rate of return, or reducing fees. But at the end of the day, everybody's using money, and your greatest track record, i.e., is like using money throughout your life. And so we have to understand, like, if that's your greatest financial need, why isn't anyone showing you the best way to efficiently use your money throughout your life? And this one was a really creative picture that Mariah got, and it's talking about we need to start thinking through the lens of control. We live in a world, again, the institutions don't want us to value control because they're using control and making a killing. And so we have institutions like banks and Wall Street and the government that are literally incentivizing us not to give up control. Every government-sponsored plan gives you have less control by contributing to that than maintaining control. Putting your money into banks, well, I mean, obviously we use it, but like at the end of the day, they're institutions that control our money way better than anybody else. And so it's like you start looking at, it's like, oh, that's how they're becoming wealthy, and yet they're teaching me to compound my money for the rest of my life. So it's kind of interesting because I'll talk about the powers of compound interest, but then on the flip side, I will also say, like, if I had to choose between one or the other, control is the way to go. And I'm going to call control the ninth one of the world, because I want people, I want to start helping people understand that we need to start stacking some of these concepts. Again, Stephen, it goes back to, could we add another C? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, for this book, it really comes down to the tug of war between compounding and control. And you can fit almost everything, including security and consistency and comfort, into one of those C's. Investing at the center, it's funny. I've said this publicly a couple times, that if I had to redo the story, I would choose Warren Buffett. I use the example of Mark Zuckerberg, and use the idea of, like, you could own Facebook stock, but who has more control over their destiny, Mark Zuckerberg or you that has a share in your mutual fund? It's like, yeah, you own it, but at the end of the day, you don't have any control. Whereas Mark Zuckerberg has a lot of control over the fate of Facebook, better or worse. The reason I love Warren Buffett, using him as this example, is Warren Buffett is known as like the stock guy. Like, everyone quotes him for like why you should invest your money for the long term and do index funds and all this stuff. What's hilarious is Warren Buffett made all of his money by being ruthless, taking capital and, buying and selling companies, buying a company, clearing out the leadership, doing mergers. Like, it's not you might like Warren Buffett. I respect how he thinks, but when he acquires your company and you're a VP at a company, like, you better be valuable, because you might not have a job next week. So that's, again, did he make his money through compounding, or did he make his money through control, and through controlling and consistency that compounded over time? Again, I get fired up about this stuff.
It's your passion. You get it? So
then it really comes down to, every step we take away from the center, there's a cost to that. It diminishes the control that we have, and it's a problem. And so here are the 9 elements when it comes to keeping your money safe, and really when it comes to the importance of controlling your money. And let me go to it in the book. So these are what I would call the 9 elements to mastering control. Okay. So the first one, and this is really key as we go through it, take mental note. When we're talking to people, these are again conversation starters. Okay? So number one, how important is safety to someone's life? For some people, it might not be important at all. For others, it's really important. Warren Buffett's 2 rules to investing is don't lose money, and number 2, don't listen to rule number 1. So it's like, okay, how important is safety to your financial life? The second one is, how important is liquidity? What is the definition of liquidity? Another way, when I've read this to study for this session, I talked about opportunity fund being a really good place for liquidity. Liquidity is your ability to access money and have it quick. And so what is the value of that? What is the value of having your money leverageable? Obviously, this is a way to set up for the future of the value of life insurance. What is the value of keeping your money private? If you have a conversations with, Ryan, you're going to know that privacy matters. They're ready to go no matter what happens, right? And so, like, privacy may not matter as much to some people, and it might be an emotional hot button for others. What's the importance of protecting your money from taxes? How valuable is protecting your money from fees? What's the importance of protecting your money from inflation? Like, we're going to enter a time where inflation might be a big factor. What's the importance of protecting your money from restrictions, like the government regulations, and then protecting your money from human life value? And one of the things that I wanted to read in human life value is this idea of things that, so your ability to earn income is your greatest financial need. End of story. Like, it is the most important thing as it relates to majority of your wealth. Like, majority of us would not be here if we didn't have the ability to create value. And so how protected or how in control are we if something happens to our health, or if we get disabled, or if we have a health scare or other things? Like, there's certain things about insurance that are super valuable because they step in when things happen in our life. And again, this is not necessarily just a life insurance only. Like, it's important to have the right insurances in place. The other thing that I wanted to say is, when we talk about number 3, leverageable, on page 51, paragraph number 4, I talk about control cost. $10 is the control cost. So 1% on 1,000, how much does that cost to control that 1,000? $10. So I probably could rewrite this in a clear way. So what I'm saying is, $10, I'm really glad this is not a typo, by the way. That would be embarrassing. $10, it costs $10 for the bank to control 1,000. So what are they? So then it takes $10. What's 4% on 1,000? That's $40. Okay. So the bank is paying $10 and they're earning 40, which is a 300% rate of return on their money. So I can for 2.0, this is going to be clear, but that's the point of the control cost is just like, it's really valuable to think like a banker. And when people say things like infinite banking and other things, and they say, like, become the bank, like, I want us to understand actually how the math works. Banks are institutions that flip our money multiple times, but they're paying us one thing, which is their investment, and they're making a profit on the other end. We're going to be able to do that same thing with the AND asset. Does that make sense, David?
Absolutely.
Okay. Dom, is there anything else that you wanted to say on this list?
Yeah. So with that, a lot of times you're going to have people that are going to come to you and say, hey, should I get an AND asset to buy cars, or should I use an AND asset to go on vacation, or whatever the case is, to buy things? That is obviously possible. You can do so. But if we're starting to think like a bank and we're starting to think like the wealthy, we're going to do exactly what they're doing, right? We're going to leverage our AND asset to go do income producing activities to go get higher rate of return than what we borrowed at. So if our policy is at 5%, we are going to have that control cost of 5% for our dollars to to go leverage it somewhere else to get something higher, if that's in a business, if that's in real estate, whatever that looks like. And that's how the banks are actually operating and not using their and asset for expenses and lifestyle and things like that. And then the other thing is with these questions 1 through 9, as the course goes on, we're going to, show you guys and teach you guys how to ask really great questions when you're talking to clients. But when we get to that point, I want you to start thinking of this list because I want you to listen. You ask the question like, hey, what is it that you want to accomplish? What is it that you want? And if somebody says, hey, I want to, keep my money private, or I want to, protect money from taxes, that's something to know. Oh, the and asset does that. And that's something to focus on.
I love it. Yeah, this is the idea of doing a book review before the course is just to prime things. And quite frankly, there are things that you'll see in our process that are maybe quote unquote better because we've learned a thing or two in the last 3.5, 4 years in doing this. So thank you for saying that. Okay, so going back to the golf club, and this again is something that I actually got from Gary Vaynerchuk, because a while ago he said, like, what's the ROI of a piano? And he's like, what's the ROI of a basketball? And he's like, if your name's LeBron, it might be a little different than you. The point is, you could use this example for anybody. It's like, what is the rate of return of a football? Okay, for Dom, who played professional, it's a little bit different from me, and then it's a little bit different from Dom to Tom Brady. Tom Brady has made a lot of money, not just on the field, but because he's a good football player. It's how he uses that game. Same thing with the golf club. So same thing as it relates to control. Same thing as it relates to anything, right? So it's one of those things where the number one factor in someone's wealth is themselves. And so the trump card that everybody gets is, how is this thing going to relate into my life? And so when someone says, like, I don't really care about control. Okay. Or like, how do you value control? Or like, everyone wants to put a rate of return on everything. Well, at the end of the day, what's the rate of return of control? If you're Chris Kirkpatrick, it might be higher than if it's an average person on the street. And so that we just have to understand that. That's why this whole chapter is about the importance of control and looking through the lens of control. This is something that you guys want to tap into. When you guys are doing personal branding, when you're doing things like, having conversations, you want to be the type of person that leans into control. You just want to be that person. And that's really going to be key. But it's something for you guys to think about, because the same thing goes with, oh, this business is really hard. Yes. And it's like, not everyone makes a good living at it, but it depends on what people do with the information, with the opportunity. And so that's just this is one of my favorite examples to use just in business coaching, because it gets people to expand their brains, and people will say, like, what's the rate of return of, advertising or speaking and all these things. It's like, it depends. Depends on how you use the opportunity. Same thing goes with, if we understand this, then we can ultimately make an infinite rate of return by a plan that you can control versus that you don't control. It all depends on that factor. But if people don't have control over their money and they put a value on control, then we're pretty much wiping out a ton of competition. And there's only a few places that you can have access to money. And if we do that, if we actually go through that whole process, life insurance, I believe, is going to be on top majority of times for majority of people as it relates to looking at all the benefits that life insurance has.
Yeah, and I'd say that part is super, super valuable and important for a business owner specifically. Because what happens to the business owner that takes their dollars and they go put it somewhere that they can go get a 20% rate of return, right? The talk is always rate of return, rate of return, rate of return. You put your money somewhere, you get 20% rate of return, but it's locked up. But then your business now is about to go under because you don't have that control of capital anymore. And now you've lost that opportunity to continue to add value and continue to have your business. Well, that 20% rate of return doesn't sound so nice anymore now that you no longer have that business.
We're talking about taxes. And this is interesting because the tax section is kind of outdated and needs to be updated. And what's funny is how fast things change. But the story that was opened up is like, would you be business partners with someone who's earning $35,000, spends $40,000, not a great trend, by the way, and has over $200,000 of credit card debt? The answer is no. Like, would you? No. Like, we wouldn't want anything to do with them. And yet you add some zeros at the time of writing this book, that was the US, situation. Like, we are entering into partnerships. We're getting in bed with the institutions that literally are underwater, and we think that's a good idea because that's what we've been taught that's what we've been taught. That's what we should do. So it's just a good way to open up. I've gotten a lot of stories about that, and then would you go into a bank, take out a 30-year loan, and with the understanding that you'll have to pay it back at 30 years, but they'll tell you how much they need, and then you'll pay them back. We'd be like, no, we'd never do that. And yet we're doing that every day. We're doing that every day because we do not know the future factors. Like, we're entering into contracts. We don't know what the future holds. Will taxes be higher? I don't know. Will taxes be lower? I don't know. It's kind of scary that we don't know, though. And all trends are pointing in one direction. So here's what I want to do. I'm going to go off script here a little bit. I'm going to take you to something that we should all be familiar with. US debt clock.org. Right here. US.debtclock.org. Let me show you a couple things. Number one, this is the debt. $28 trillion. If you want to be depressed tonight, Google what does a trillion, like, how much is a trillion? Because it's a lot. You start looking at it compared to like what a million is, it's a joke. So this is what's interesting, but what not a lot of people show you is some other things to look at. So, this is the tax revenue that we're bringing in. And if you go down here, here's the budget of Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security and defense and the interest on debt. Here's the US total debt, meaning the unfunded liabilities. These are things that we're on the hook for. And I have an example in the book. Social Security, interest, Medicaid, and everything else. $86 trillion. $86 trillion. So what's interesting is yes, $28 trillion is a lot of money. It's a ton of money. And what's interesting about this is you can go back in time, 1980. We didn't even have a trillion. And then you can move it forward, to 1999. We had our first 2.9 trillion. So it's interesting. This tool is free, and you don't have to do a lot of selling. You just have to show people, and people are smart enough to say like, oh, this is not a great trend.
In 1980, it was going up 1,000 every second, and then now it's going up like 100,000 every second.
Yeah, and then what about? Oh yeah, that's it's not. It's bad, right? And we go to 2025. Yikes. 2025. Here are the projections. I don't know what to say other than this is not a great trend. If we want to go after high net worth people, understand taxes. Because it's, especially after yesterday, it's like people are in a bad mood. They don't think taxes are going to go down. Okay. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. Okay. So, yeah, that's, I believe, and this was written, I believe, before the movie Power of Zero came out. And the whole purpose of that movie is just to show, like, to get people to understand that there's a tax train coming down. And it's really powerful because it brings an emotion that gets people to take action. And so the big thing is, I want us all to take note of this, is a lot of people talk about, deferring their tax. They're deferring their tax. They're doing tax deferral plans. They're getting a deduction, which is a lie, because a true deduction means you actually get to deduct your taxes. And you could prove that it's not a deduction, because at the end of the day, you're getting a benefit, but you're not deducting any tax. You're just postponing it. You're kicking the can down the road. So the one thing that I would like everyone's language to change is when you think about plans push taxes to the future, just you start using the word postponement. Like they're postponing the tax. We don't know what the threshold's going to be, and we don't know what the rate's going to be. A lot of people talks about the rate. Like, oh, taxes are going to go up. The ninja way for politicians to raise more revenue is to change the thresholds. The media doesn't pick it up. People don't freak out. At the end of the day, the threshold of like, are we going to tax on $100,000 or $1 million? What's going to be the highest tax rate? You can raise a lot of revenue by just changing the thresholds. The point is, we don't have a lot of control over that. And so in this chapter, I talk about 3 examples, and they're all attacking something, and it all just goes down to like, is it worth it? Like, do we want to pay tax on the seed or the harvest? And there's a lot of things unknown, and it just gets people to start thinking. This is interesting. Almost 10,000 baby boomers turn 65 every day. How is that going to affect the long-term effects of, taxation and other things?
We have to pay for Medicare, Social Security,
Yeah,
everything for them.
We love the baby boomers, by the way. So but it's just reality. It's just interesting. So here's one thing that is also fascinating is, okay, if you're meeting with clients who are in financial ruin, there's 3 things that there's 3 things that you need to do. So if you met with this people that are making 30, or what is the example? They're bringing in 34. They're bringing in 35, they're spending 40, and they're $200,000 in debt. What are some of the things that they could do? Okay, debt needs to be paid down. I don't know with what money. Expenses need to decrease. Stop spending money, and you need to make more money. And just, I think majority of people would agree that we are in a position right now, and I'm empathetic to the position we're in, but we're not in a position where you can just cut programs. Like, whether you like it or not, there's certain programs that we could have a debate about, but no politician's going to do that because it's going to be suicide politically. And so I don't see anybody, even Republicans or super conservatives, saying they're going to, like, they spend just as much money as the Democrats. They just spend it on different things. And so you look at programs and it's a problem. And then you look at, like, what is the solution? Well, we're either going to cut spending or we're going to have to make more money. And we might just continue this issue, but it's just, it does cause a lot of questions. And at the end of the day, economically, you're not going to get out of this by taxing higher taxes, because you're actually going to disincentivize entrepreneurship and people to make money and all of that. So there's going to be we're in a pickle, but when you look at where trends are going, it's definitely, there's not a lot of people talking about we need lowering taxes. All right. I could pretty much talk the whole time on taxation because it's something that's big. Controlling your money like a banker. This one was actually really fun for me because everyone's talking about this. Is like, this comes from bank on yourself kind of deal. Like, you want to be the bank, all these things. And it's like, okay, you're saying that, but like, what are the characteristics of a bank that are good? Like, why, like, what do we want? Why do we want to be like the bank? And so if you actually look at a bank, there's 5 things that they do. And i.e., these 5 things are something that we should do. So it's like, I'm not going to be out there saying, be your own bank, like start your own bank, use the principles like a bank, and you can call it whatever you want. If you want to do a family bank, you can call it that. But at the end of the day, what are the principles? And the first principle is flow. Getting your money to flow to you. Like, banks will pay you a direct, like they will waive fees and stuff when you can connect certain accounts and have money automatically flowing to you every 2 weeks or whatever. It's like, they are institutions that are literally magnets for money. They're getting money to come in powerfully. Number 2 is the leverage piece. It's where I read last time with the control cost. And it's interesting because banks take this concept of leverage and just maximize it. And I show a cash investor, and And if you look at a cash investor, they have a $100 investment, and like say they make a 4% profit. So they put their $100 into an investment that earns 4%. Their return on investment is 4%. So at the end of the year, they have $104. A bank is like, okay, their investment's $1 because they're paying that 1% on your $100. Then they go lend it to Dom over here and say, I'm gonna get that 4%, but the profit is 3% because their control cost is 1. Okay, so we might have to say this over again just to make sure that everyone's on the same page. Your control cost is 1. You make 4. That means your profit's $3. The bank makes 300% in this scenario, and they took $1 and got an investment, whereas the good old cash investor had no leverage in their life and put all my money at risk. This is the thing that banks are doing. They're maximizing leverage. What we're going to be able to do through the and asset is we're going to maximize and lean into leverage. And going back to what Bill was saying, and lean into the power of giving your dollar more than one job. That's only made possible through leverage. A lot of people think leverage is a bad thing. I think it creates more safety, more options, more wealth, and it's tax efficient. Understanding how to properly leverage our wealth. Number 3 is liquidity. It goes back to the golden rule, right? Whoever has the gold makes the rules. Everyone, it was crazy to me looking at people that worked at our bank, and they would come in and they would put their money and have certain investments, SEP IRAs, whatever, and then they would come beg for a business loan. Why did they do that? Because the banks were the institutions that were the easiest place to get money. And so because of that, liquidity becomes opportunities. And think about that. How many of us are able to, if something happens in the economy in the next year or two, for us to make a jump? You know, how many of us have the liquidity of our assets, and it really comes down to opportunities. Number 4 is really interesting, is they understand how to collateralize and shift the risk from them to you. So it's not only am I going to make 300% on Dom, but then I'm going to make him put up his car, or I'm going to make him put up his house, because if he doesn't pay me, I'm going to foreclose on him. Guys, that's called being smart. Banks are smart. They're getting all these things, and then they're shifting risk. And then number 5, which this is the thing that I have to give most credit to people like Nelson Nash and others, is talking about the importance of velocity. And one of the examples is running water like a river versus a pond. You want your money to be in motion. The cool thing about banks, and I'm going to go back to the leverage piece, this scenario is saying, okay, I control cost is $1, I'm making 3, so I'm making 300%, and that's like boom, and then I can flip money multiple times. And there's problems with the Federal Reserve. Like there's a lot of problems that comes with banks to be able to lend out money that they don't have, kind of deal, and the Federal Reserve just printing money. But at the end of the day, what they're doing, what we should be able to model, is they're flipping money. They're using it multiple places. And this is the thing that a lot of people miss, I would say, quote, or maybe miss, like they think there's something special about borrowing from your policy to buy certain things. At the end of the day, we want to create more money flowing to us, and we want to have our mind thinking about what are opportunities. And if you can make an investment and make a 4%, but it's on 1 month versus a year, now you have your capital back ready to deploy for other things. Banks do it really well, and ultimately the philosophy of velocity is really, really powerful. All right.
Isn't it just kind of crazy when you think about like the process? Like the bank takes your money, they lend that same money essentially to you.
Yeah.
And then you have to put your house up as collateral, and then you have to pay them money for that note, and then they take your money and go repeat that with somebody else.
Yeah. They're like, we're gonna incentivize you to flow money to us. We're gonna leverage. We have all the money, so you're gonna have to come to us. Oh, by the way, when you do come to us, we're going to make you put up your collateral, because God forbid, I don't want to lose money on you. And oh, by the way, we're going to then do this multiple times.
And they use no money, none of their money.
Well, they use some of their money,
barely.
The cost of doing business. And by the way, in full honesty, the bank owner JG, doesn't like this chapter because he's like, Caleb, that 1% is not fair because we have costs of doing business, salaries, bank, lights, like all 100%. I'm not saying the bank earns 300%. I'm saying that's what math says. But there's a lot of money. And then I was like, isn't it remarkable that a bank that just marks up money is able to have 3 locations and 24 employees? That's pretty wild. It's like, what do we do to stay in business? It's because banking is really profitable. And instead of hating on the banks, we should learn to do that. Chapter 4 is uninterrupted compounding. We have to play a lifetime game. We have to, if we're going to commit to a compounding strategy, we have to commit it for life, and then we have to understand everything that works against us. Every time you lose a dollar, you don't just lose that dollar, but you lose the generational impact that dollar can have on you and in your future. Control is all about, number one, what is the value of that? We lean into the entrepreneurial of like, I want to be at the center. I want to be able to access my money, but also for the people that you guys are seeing, how much control do they have over anything? Like, there are people that can make decisions that can wipe people out. So think about, lean into that. Number 3, taxes. Taxes is like this thing that we don't have a lot of clarity on, but there's a lot of things pointing to our country is going to be put in a position to do things that are probably could compromise your ability to build wealth. That's what I'll say. So it's like, how important is that? And I know, Holly, you said that there's institutions that just use the tax thing. That's their pitch. It's not a bad pitch. And then the number 4 section, chapter 7, is controlling your money like a bank. And the big thing I want you guys to understand is the importance of the principles, especially behind flowing your money and controlling your money and control costs, and the importance of leverage and the profoundness of that. Because next week, we're going to then talk about the and asset, and Bill, what you're saying is bring it all together. Like, bringing it all together. Now that we know the importance of efficiency, now that we know the importance of compounding, now that we know the importance of control, and we can have a place to put that in our head, now we're going to look at the and asset and why, when set up and used properly, it's one of the most efficient assets because of how it analyzes and uses both compounding and control. And again, this has been really special for me because I've never done a book review. And it's been really fun to just go through, and I appreciate all the people that have participated and chatted. Thank you so much for listening to the BetterWealth podcast. It would mean the world to me if you could hit subscribe, leave a review, and share this with the people that you know and love.